Today's witness is called Benjamin. He's plump, rosy-cheeked, wide-eyed, much younger in appearance than his 25 years. A gentle, high voice, a childlike innocence of manner, left hand and foot slightly spastic. He bears witness of a man carrying water and of a sad Passover supper in an upper room. The witness of Benjamin. For quite a long time I thought my brother would get into trouble for letting the carpenter and the 12 eat their Passover supper upstairs. The way things out, I mean, with the carpenter being arrested the same night and executed the next day. Sailing very close to the wind that was, I'd say. But my brother's like that. He's not afraid of anything. He's the strong one. He tells me what to do and I do it. He looks after me. He brought me up pretty well after my father died. He's nearly 8 years older. He's not really a follower of Jesus. He owed him a debt. Sharon, my brother's wife, was very ill, dying in fact. No one could do anything. No one knew what it was. About 2 years ago, Jesus put his hand on her head and told her she would get well, and she did, in 2 days. My brother told Jesus that the big room upstairs was his whenever he wanted it, for any purpose, for holding meetings, or for hiding in when things got hot. My brother knows how things go in this city. In Jerusalem things can get hot, especially if you run foul of the temple lot or Governor Pilate. Jesus did both, I'm told. I only met Jesus once to talk to. On the night of that supper, upstairs, barely a year ago. It'll soon be Passover again. I like Passover. It's a happy feast, especially the suppers of the first nights, when the freedom from slavery story is told. The supper upstairs wasn't a very happy one. It was all rather strange. The whole day was odd. At breakfast, my brother told me to clean the big room and put the long table up. I asked him who for, and were we going to have a Passover party? No, he said. The carpenter said the 12 were coming. I was surprised, because Jesus had made no use of the room. When did you hear from him? I said. Never mind, said my brother. Sharon was pleased, and she got busy cooking, getting all the big bowls out, making bread without salt, unleavened. About midday, my brother told me to take a big water jug and go to the market well and fill it. Very odd. We have our own well in the garden. I was going to ask why, but sometimes it's best not to. My brother usually has a good reason, and the market is not far, and the melon woman is by the well. I like melon. I bought some melon and sat in the sun while I ate it. Then I picked up the jug and started back. And 2 men started to follow me. Both big, strong-looking men. It was obvious they weren't secret about it. I tried to shake them off. I was a bit scared, but I couldn't, so I came home so that my brother could handle it. As I got to our door, they came right up and stood on either side of me, looking down at me and smiling. The larger one put his hand on my shoulder. Then my brother opened the door and greeted them by name. Peter and John. It was 2 of the 12. Peter, the one with his hand on my shoulder, said he had a message from his master, and we were inside. I took the water up to the room, and after a minute or 2 they came up with my brother to see the room, and then they left. I went on doing the room and helping Sharon with the cooking, and in the late afternoon they all arrived together, just as the sun was going down. Just as I'd finished the preparations. They stayed downstairs with us for a while, and I served them with wine and nuts and dates. Sharon came in wearing a new Passover dress, and they were nice to her, and the carpenter asked her how she was keeping. She looked very pretty. They were a very assorted lot of men. About the only thing they had in common was a Galilee accent, except one. A dark, rather tense-looking man called Judas, who didn't smile at all. My brother told me that Judas came from the far south, from Kerioth, that his name Iscariot meant that, man of Kerioth. I didn't like him. Some of the 12 were cousins of the carpenter. There were 2 pairs of brothers, all fishermen. They were all rough sort of men, even the one Sharon said had been a tax collector. She said one of them, who was quick and fiery, was a nationalist, anti-Roman, a revolutionary. There were 2 called James, one a little cheerful man. The biggest of the 12 was Peter. His brother Andrew was like him, but not as tall or heavy, and he was quieter. I suppose the quietest of them all that night was Jesus. He listened more than he spoke and seemed rather sad. Not very Passover-ish, as I call it, at all. When I asked Sharon if she and my brother and I were also going to be upstairs in the big room, she said we'd not been invited. We were to have our own Passover supper downstairs with some family as usual, but I would help a little upstairs with the serving and taking up of food and so on. Then, when the sun had nearly gone, Jesus stood up. He seemed rather tired. Everyone stopped talking and he led the way upstairs. It seemed to be very solemn for Passover. After a few minutes, my brother told me to go up and make certain they had enough water and towels for the hand washing before food. When I went in, it was feet that were being washed. Jesus, the chief one, the head of them all, was on his knees in front of Peter washing his feet and drying them on a towel. He'd already done about 12:30. There they sat, with clean feet. It was most odd and all rather serious. The 12 seemed rather embarrassed, except Judas, who was scowling and looked angry. I went down and brought up more water and 2 fresh towels. When I offered to help, Jesus smiled and said no, and Judas gestured with his hand for me to get out. Our own supper, downstairs, was, as always on Passover, very happy, with lots of songs and wine. Every now and then I would go up to the big room with the large dishes of each course for them to serve themselves. They didn't seem to be enjoying themselves as much as we were downstairs. No songs at all. The second time I went up, they were just finishing the dish of savoury dip that Sharon always makes at Passover to start the meal. You dip bits of bread in to give you a happy year. As I walked in, about 4 of them were dipping, and Jesus was saying in a calm sort of way, "One of you is going to betray me." They all looked at him with their mouths open. I felt very out of place and went out immediately. As I got to the bottom of the stairs, I heard the door to the room open and shut, and then Judas came down. He was in a hurry. He nearly pushed me over, although I don't think he even saw me. He looked terrified and sort of guilty. He rushed straight out into the street and up the road. I told my brother, and he said it was none of our business and that I should take up a flask of our best wine with his compliments. I wasn't keen and left it for a bit, then took it up when I took up the meat, the Passover lamb. I was almost afraid to open the door. When I did, the carpenter was on his feet, breaking pieces off a new loaf and passing them along to his friends. "Eat," he said, "in memory of me, in memory of my body." Then he saw me. "And we will drink good wine," he said, "and it will also be in memory of me, of my blood, which is soon to be shed for you." I poured the wine in absolute silence. Jesus drank his and said, "I will drink no more wine until I drink it with you all in my Father's kingdom." I thought he meant his father was a king and he was a prince soon going home. He didn't look like a prince. As I went out, they were beginning a hymn, a rather sad one, not a Passover song at all. The last time I went up was to ask if any more of anything was needed and to take up some of Sharon's cinnamon and almond cakes. I knocked, but there seemed to be a lot of raised voices, and I wasn't heard, so after a moment I went in. Most of the 12 were on their feet, all talking and protesting at once. The carpenter was in the middle. Then he spoke, without raising his voice at all. "It is written in the Scriptures," he said, you will lose faith in me, all of you. The noise started again, and the big man, Peter, spoke the loudest. Not me, he said, not me, even if all the others do, not me. Then Jesus spoke again. I tell you, Peter, he said, that before the cock crows tomorrow morning, you will have denied you even knew me 3 times. The big man could hardly speak. I put down the little cakes and went downstairs. Not long after, they all came down. Jesus thanked my mother and Sharon, and they all went out into the dark. They were all very quiet, not in the least like they'd been to a Passover party. I went up to the big room and started to clear up. The little cakes were where I put them, untouched.